Hey everyone, Danny here. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode number 342. Thank you for joining me as we continue making our way through the book of Matthew. In today's episode, we are picking back up in chapter 20. And it reads this: "For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard." Now, just a side note here. A denarius, if you were unsure, was equal to about a day's wage for a laborer. So a denarius would be the value of putting in a day's work. Okay. So after agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, "You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give you." So they went, going out again, about the 6th hour, and the 9th hour he did the same. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing, and he said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You go into the vineyard too." And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first." Now, let me stop right here. This is an observation that I feel like has just really come to the surface for the first time. It's pretty exciting. Notice here how generous the master of the house is. He finds someone with no work, and he's willing to hire them and exchange work for pay. And he doesn't do this but not only once, but he does it on multiple occasions. He sees someone who has no work, and he wants to offer them an opportunity to work in his vineyard. And notice too that he's willing to pay them. It's not just about taking them as, servants and slaves, forcing them to do his bidding and his work. We've seen in many cultures where this is the case, that those in power, those with, might and strength and the financial means, they dominate and oppress those with less. Here in this analogy, we see that this master of the house, he is very kind. He is very generous. He's willing to pay them what is fair. Notice that they agree to the sum of money for the work that they do. Again, how generous he is willing to negotiate with them. So I just say this to really point out, to bring to the surface how kind and generous this master is of this property, of this house and possession. It belongs to him, but he is gracious to extend the opportunity to those that he sees who have nothing, who are idle, who have no opportunity. He is generous to offer them one. And so too is God, as the master of over the house, so too is he generous and kind and gracious. And so I hope that comes through in this parable that Jesus is expressing here. So he calls the laborers to pay them their wages, beginning with the last up to the first. So notice the last laborers are paid their wages first up to the first laborers. Verse 9, and when those hired about the 11th hour came, so that would have been the ones hired last, each of them received a denarius. Now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on receiving it, they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, these last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. But he replied to one of them, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? So the last will be first and the first last. So here, again, notice the generosity of the master. Notice the generosity of God. It all belongs to him. Is it not his to determine, to conclude what he does with what belongs to him? Yes, of course. But why is this so hard for us to understand, to grasp, to come to terms with? And notice there at the last, he says, so the last will be first and the first last. Now we see that in this payment of wages, the last ones are paid first, and the first ones would then ultimately be paid last. So there is perhaps a timing component to this, but I think it goes a step further, and I think perhaps captures more of the heart of what this is telling us by means of the last will be first, the first will be last. What do we learn in the payment of the services rendered? It's equal. The ones who came last to work were paid the same sum the first ones were paid, who in truth worked longer and perhaps harder and under more pressure and difficulty, but they were paid the same. So I would submit to you to consider that the last will be first, the first will be last. This also, and I think more emphatically, emphasizes that the reward or the payment is equal. The first is paid the same as the last. The last will be first, and the first last. It's an indicator of equality. Verse 17, and as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside, and on the way he said to them, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified, and he will be raised on the third day. It's pretty clear, it seems, wouldn't you think? Verse 20, then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him, so the mother of the sons of Zebedee, James and John, came up to him with her sons kneeling before him. She asked him for something, and he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your kingdom." Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink?" They said to him, "We are able." He said to them, "You will drink my cup, but to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those to whom it has been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came, not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Now, I'll say this one piece here, and I think it's definitely up for debate. What is it? They ask to let one of them sit at his right and one at his left in his kingdom, and then Jesus says something strange. You don't know what you're asking. Well, they thought they knew what they were asking. They wanted a place of authority in his kingdom, to sit on both his sides. The place of the right hand is this place of power, typically, is the picture that portrays. But Jesus tells him, you don't know what you're asking. Why do you think that is? Maybe when they ask to sit at his right and left, what does Jesus have in mind? Maybe he's thinking about the cross. Maybe he's thinking about the place that we actually find the two criminals, one on each of his sides. Maybe this is what comes to mind in their request. It is by way of the cross that Jesus gains victory over this lost, if you will, kingdom. And through his death, by way of his death and ultimately his resurrection, he would be crowned, or rather perhaps regain authority over that which was forfeited by way of Adam and Eve. So when they ask him to sit at his right and his left, and Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking, but you will drink my cup. Maybe he's saying, you're asking to be on that day, one at my right and one at my left, on the crosses beside me. But rather, that place has been reserved for whom it has been prepared. That would be to speak of those criminals, one on his right and one on his left. I propose that as a consideration. Verse 29, and as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed him. And behold, there were 2 blind men sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David. They knew something about him that even the religious leaders did not notice. They were looking. Obviously, Scripture tells of the one who is to come, a son of David. But for some reason, the religious leaders could not see, even though the genealogies were very important to the Jewish people. They could not even have eyes to see that he was an offspring of David. However, 2 blind men could see. Isn't that interesting? Son of David, have mercy on us. Verse 31, the crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent, but they cried out all the more. I think of David, even more extravagant than this. I will worship the Lord and look all the more foolish to exalt his name. And stopping, Jesus called them and said, what do you want me to do for you? They said to him, Lord, let our eyes be opened. And Jesus, in pity, touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. Two things I want to point out here as we close. Immediately after Jesus, having pity, sympathy, touched their eyes, and they were recovered their sight and followed him. If you track the miracles of Jesus, you'll see that he does many miracles. He opens many blind eyes. He casts out many demons. But he does it in a way that is not always the same. Sometimes he makes mud and rubs it on the eyes. Sometimes he talks. He says, be opened, see. Sometimes he touches the eyes. He says nothing. So I think this is very important because it helps us to keep, to guard ourselves against trying to create some duplication, some process, some procedure for what we are to do. We are to rather follow the voice of the Lord in the moment, obeying him in the how and the mechanism by which we move and act. And it is in that faith and trust in God that we see that breakthrough come. So it prevents us from having this cookie cutter process. Okay, that's one thing. And the last thing, and I think a very important thing for each of us to think and answer for ourselves. If Jesus calls to you and asks, what do you want me to do for you? If he were to pose that question to each of us in the privacy of our own homes and rooms and cars and streets and wherever you are, wherever you're listening, wherever you find yourself, what do you want me to do for you? These men, they knew exactly what they wanted. They wanted to see. And Jesus didn't ridicule them and talk down to them to say, that's a very earthly, fleshly thing to want. He simply had sympathy for them. His heart went out to them, and he responded accordingly. But if Jesus came to you and asked, what do you want me to do for you? What would you say? What is that desire that you find yourself constantly, often going back to? I think asking that question honestly and answering it honestly is also very revealing. What fills your heart with desire? What is it that you desire, what you want? And if God asked you, if Christ himself said, what would you like for me to do for you? I think depending on our answer, that reveals a lot about our heart. And it's encouraging, no matter where we find ourselves in that answer, that we can be honest with Christ to say, I want this. And, maybe we get it. Maybe he says, no, this isn't the right time for that. Maybe he says, that's not the right thing for you. I have something more appropriate or even better. So I would encourage you in this coming week to ask that question and be very sober and honest, what would you say if given that opportunity? So thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate you taking the time to make your way through these episodes. I thank you for just being with me. I hope these help you and strengthen you, encourage you, and stimulate you to really pursue God, to see what treasures that He can reveal to your heart by way of Scripture, by way of His voice. I would encourage you to find others who are really looking for someone to come and fellowship with. Look for those who are overlooked and for the hurting and the lost, and be a light and encouragement to them. So thank you so much for being with me, and I look forward to the next episode. God bless.